There's been quite a bit of back and forth recently on Twitter between two companies in particular, Tesla and Porsche. And of course many of us know about that at this point regarding the performance of their flagship electric super saloons around the infamous Nordschleife. And that's an interesting little battle, especially if you are invested in one of those two companies. But the reality of the situation is that while Porsche and Tesla are arguing amongst themselves over whose flick knife has the bigger blade, there's a third contender waiting in the shadows wielding a battle axe. And that company is called Draco. They're based in Silicon Valley and they build a car called the GTE. And this is it. And if you're thinking it looks familiar, you're correct, because it's based on the Fisker Karma. So, welcome of course to another episode of the News Roundup, especially when it comes to automotive news once again, because this is a car which isn't necessarily brand spanking new news, but it is relatively recent, and I would certainly say it's a car that deserves more attention than it's getting, and unfortunately that is probably due to the Porsche-Tesla rivalry. Now this particular vehicle, as I said, is based on the Fisker Karma chassis, a car which I'm actually a fan of. You can pick up a used Fisker Karma for about $45,000 or so, and it was a genuinely interesting, if not somewhat oddball alternative to a Tesla Model S at the time, especially before Tesla had brought out the all-wheel drive models. You had around 400 horsepower, it weighed about the same as a Bentley Continental GT, aka 2.4 tons, it was rear-engine rear-wheel drive with a very curious 2-litre petrol-burning GM engine under the front, which powered the battery pack. An interesting way of doing things. It had a recycled interior, 22-inch rims as standard, and looked kind of like a BMW M6 meets Aston Martin Rapide and then put under a blowtorch. I personally love the Fisker Karma's design. I think it's a gorgeous looking car, hands down better looking than the Tesla, even though I do love the Tesla Model S as well. But the reason why you shouldn't be worried about who wins between Porsche and Tesla on the Nurburgring is because this car, let's be honest, is going to completely blow both of them out of the water. And in some ways it already has, because this is not some concept car, it's not vaporware, it's already production ready. And they are releasing the car next year. In 2020, Draco are releasing and selling 25 GTEs with a price tag of an eye-watering $1.25 million each, or £1 million approximately. So the question is, why on earth would you want to pay $1.25 million, Pagani money, or Koenigsegg money in some cases, for a Fisker Karma? Well, of course, it's no Fisker Karma underneath. Essentially, this car answers the question that nobody was asking except possibly me, and that is, what would happen if you took the heart and soul of a Rimac Concept 1 and put it into a Fisker Karma's shell? Because that is pretty much what this is. It has, instead of a hybrid layout, 4 individually controlled electric motors and a 90 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which falls somewhere between Tesla's options of 75 and 100, and those 4 motors help the car to put out 1,200 horsepower. In comparison, Porsche's Taycan Turbo S, which doesn't make much sense as a name, but there you go, produces 750 horsepower, and the Tesla Model S P100D in ludicrous mode has 780. Both impressive, but they're not 1,200. It's literally an electric super saloon with the power of a Veyron Supersport. But that's not even the most nuts thing about this car, because if you've already seen this car on Top Gear or various other sites, you'll have noticed something pretty crazy about it, and that is the torque. Because this car, according to Draco, and there's no reason really to doubt them at this point because it's production ready, puts out a claimed 6,490 pound-feet of torque, which is bonkers. And that completely eclipses the amount of torque that both Tesla and Porsche have combined. In fact, that has more torque than the Tesla and the Porsche put together and doubled, well over that amount. And the top speed on this car is significantly higher as well. Now, typically electric cars tend to be speed limited, and although as far as I'm aware Draco haven't announced whether or not this one is, I think it probably is, because the top speed is 206 miles per hour, which sounds good for an electric car, but of course the Rimac is faster, for instance, with less power, 221 miles an hour on the Concept 1, so it could definitely do more. I think they've probably speed limited it to, as they often do, protect the batteries, conserve efficiency, all that kind of good stuff that an electric car would typically do. And the similarities to both Tesla and Rimac don't end there, because just like a Tesla, the battery pack is floor pan located to keep the weight nice and low, and the weight is probably quite high, let's say. I should imagine at least 2 tons for a car like this, probably more. And like a Rimac, those 4 individual motors also have torque vectoring, which incidentally was tested at the Nurburgring. So I believe this might be another one of those occasions where when somebody finally gets around to testing this car around the Nordschleife, it might be kind of like the NIO EP9 or the Neo EP9, that electric car that broke the record at the Nürburgring that nobody really took much notice of. This, unfortunately, will probably fall into a similar fate, if you will, because it doesn't have Porsche or Tesla written on the front. And that's a shame, because what a car this is. I've always loved the look of the Fisker, and now this arguably takes the Fisker's essential idea and really makes it what it could have been, had they maybe tried to go from Tesla territory into Rimac territory, or Bugatti territory even. But overall, I love this car, of course I do, and if you hadn't heard of it already, you probably see now why I think you should. But that's it overall for this installment. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.